Well, hello, I'm Brooke Hemphill, the Associate Editor of B&T Magazine, and this afternoon I'm joined by Tim Westergren, who is the co-founder of Pandora Internet Radio, for this, the first in a series of ADMA webinars. So thank you so much for joining us, Tim.
My pleasure.
Now, I'm just going to start off by giving people a little bit of information about you, Tim. So just to let everyone know, you have quite a musical background, having worked as a composer and a musical producer, and you're one of the co-founders of Pandora Media, and you helped to create the Music Genome project, which is a mathematical algorithm that organizes music. So that's what fires the engine of Pandora Internet Radio, which launched in the year 2000. So today, I understand that Pandora has more than 250 million users in the US and more than 1.5 million users here in Australia. And then in 2010, Time magazine listed you, Tim, as one of the 100 most influential people in the world, which must be equal parts flattering and daunting, I imagine. Does that sound about right?
Yes, yes. All surreal.
What I was going to start off by doing was getting you to sort of explain to us what Pandora is for anyone that might be out there watching that isn't aware, and how you would explain it to them.
Right, so the idea behind Pandora is it's a personalized form of internet radio. So it allows you to create radio stations tailored to your personal tastes, and you'd do it by simply typing in the name of a favorite song or artist into Pandora on a myriad of devices, so on a computer, a laptop, a desktop, a mobile phone, a connected device, pretty much anything that's web connected and can stream audio, you can launch and create up to 100 personalized stations and listen to music all day long.
Fantastic. So obviously your experience working with music had a bit of a role in creating Pandora. Can you tell us a bit about what that is?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I've worn a bunch of hats as a musician. Before founding the company, I spent my 20s and early 30s trying to make a living as a musician. So I spent a lot of years living out of a van and touring the western United States, trying to become a rock star. And then I was a film composer for a while, so I spent a lot of time writing scores for film. And those two experiences, one kind of first being in and among this sort of sea of really talented musicians that nobody really knew about, all sort of struggling to find an audience, and then as a film composer, spending all my time trying to understand someone else's taste, one day led to this idea of trying to kind of codify taste, essentially, to be able to break down music into its component parts and build what initially intended to be just a music recommendation system, not even a radio, just a technology we'd licensed to other companies. And that was in 2000. And what ensued was an adventure of sorts, surviving the big .com collapse and then reemerging in '05 with this product that we call Pandora. And it just took off like a rocket ship when we launched it in the fall of 2005.
So can you tell me about the Music Genome project? How does it work?
Yeah, so the Genome product itself is this enormous database of songs. There are well over 1 million now that have each been listened to and analyzed by a trained musician along as many as 450 attributes per song. So we have this big team of very highly trained musicians who spend all day literally manually scoring songs to sort of capture every detail of melody and harmony and rhythm and form and instrumentation. It's kind of like musical DNA. And then we use an algorithm to kind of create relationships using that data between songs and build playlists. So you put a song or an artist into Pandora, we go hunting for musical neighbors to create a station for you.
So what are those specific data points that you have your analyst logging?
Well, so there are close to 450, and take, for example, the voice. We analyze the sound of the lead singer on over 20 attributes just to understand the voice. And so those would be things like the use of vibrato, the range, the different timbral layers in the voice, the use of glottal, all these sort of techniques and sort of sonic qualities that across those 20 attributes, you could describe Tom Waits or Mariah Carey just kind of using different scores on each one of those measurements. It's like primary colors.
So are there certain artists or genres of music that are easier to classify using those criteria than others?
Yeah, so Frank Zappa is a pain in the butt, and so is Beck and King Crimson. There are a handful of artists that we have a terribly hard time capturing. Part of what makes music so great is there's only so much you can capture about what makes a song tick. And there are some artists that are harder than others, for sure.
Fair enough. So you sort of mentioned you have music analysts and a variety of different people working with you. Tell us a bit about the team at Pandora. There must be a very varying range of job titles within the company.
Yeah, well, it's expanded a lot over the years. So we have close to 1,300 employees now, and a big crew. Shout out to the folks in New Zealand and Australia, fast-growing and a hard-working group out there. And the disciplines at Pandora span this enormous range. So we have straight-up musicians, violinists, drummers, pianists, the whole gamut. We also have software engineers, of course, designers, user experience designers, a huge IT team. But we also have an enormous data science team, so folks who play in the world of big numbers. And that group includes literally a rocket scientist that we hired from NASA, alongside a woman whose PhD is in learning behavior in rats. So it's this enormous collection of disciplines that all come together to create the playlist engine.
What does a woman who specializes in the behavior of rats do at Pandora?
Well, the thing about the playlist now is there are two components. There's the Music Genome project, which is the core of it. But now, over the years, we've amassed this enormous amount of feedback from listeners in the form of thumbs up and thumbs down. So when you use Pandora, as you know, you can vote songs up or down, and that helps to refine the playlist to sort of personalize it to you. And we have over 40 billion pieces of thumb feedback. And that creates this immense opportunity to sort of study data and use that to make them playlists better. So that's the world of big data. And people come into big data from all sorts of angles, including biology. And they all have interesting perspectives to add. So this playlist team has rocket scientists and DJs working together.
Wow. I was going to actually ask you about data. I went along to ADMA held a data day a few months ago, and Jane Huxley, who I can see is on the call with us now, she spoke about Pandora at the event. And she was saying that she calls Pandora a data company. So how is it that you're using data? Obviously, the musical side of things is a clear indication of what you're doing with the data. But in terms of users and joining them and connecting them with advertisers, how is the data working for you there?
Yeah, so the data has two big roles. One, as you said, is the playlist, and that's an ongoing process. We keep refining it day by day. And more recently, in the last couple of years, we brought literally the same set of expertise as many people in that playlist group, actually, who are now being borrowed to build out a similar set of capabilities on the advertising side. And so we're looking at the data to derive interesting information about listeners. And it's really remarkable what you can learn about somebody just from their usage of the service, what songs they select, the stations they create. You put that together with age, gender, and their zip code, which Pandora gets upon registration, and you can begin to determine ethnicity, political stripes, propensity to purchase various goods, and you can, of course, create really interesting cohorts for social networking. So there's so much opportunity in there that we're really beginning to leverage for brands and advertisers that makes the ad space ever more valuable. So to give you an example, I
understand that in the States,
determine with 90% accuracy in the U.S. whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, just based on the music you listen to in your zip code.
Yeah, right. So I understand that in terms of advertising and monetizing the platform, it's a little bit further ahead in the States than what it is here in Australia. Have you got any examples of some interesting campaigns that have been done on Pandora in the States?
Sure. So one of the beauties of a web product like this, a unicast service where you're delivering a single stream to an individual, is you can micro-target. So we have campaigns that routinely run that target messages based on a combination of all these attributes. So age, gender, zip, musical style, time of day, So the campaigns can literally target 30-something women in their 30s in the Kansas City metro area that like country music and are Democrats. The advertisers are really becoming sophisticated about essentially optimizing how they spend. And I know Jane's team out there is bringing this exact same capability to the Australian, New Zealand market. So in actuality, the capabilities in the U.S. are leverageable immediately overseas. So we're obviously collecting a lot of data, but we have so much data already that we have it's like a huge accelerant to that process down under.
So would you say there is a typical Pandora user?
No, there's not. You know, the thing about Pandora is we designed the site to feel like home for everyone. So whether you're, you know, a 15-year-old with a skateboard and a nose ring listening to, you know, goth rock, or you're an 85-year-old listening to big band music that you grew up with, we want Pandora to feel like a place that was made for you. So we very, very deliberately did not tailor it to a particular demographic. And we have 13-year-olds, which is our minimum age, and 100 people over 100 years old using Pandora. The early adopters generally tend to be people in the 20s and 30s, as is common with, you know, any kind of service that involves broadband connection. But we look like the population now.
I was reading a great piece on the Wall Street Journal where you were talking about how Pandora is helping older people who have maybe lost interest with traditional radio because it's not really appealing to their tastes in music, playing all of this new music. How is that? Can you sort of explain how that works?
Yeah, well, you know, one of the things about Pandora is that we're the service for the casual listener. You know, someone who's pushing a pram, working a spreadsheet, you know, who doesn't have a lot of time to go invest in creating their perfect playlist or, you know, navigating through hundreds of songs to find just the right tune. They just want to hit a button and be entertained, which is the vast majority of music listenership. And we want to make it drop dead easy. Hit a button and music plays for you. And I think that becomes increasingly important as people get older. They tend to be a little less tech savvy, a little more easily intimidated by, you know, complexity and sites that are more geared towards power users. We are distinctly not that. You know, Pandora is for like the, you know, I don't have a lot of time, do it for me crowd, which happens to be most people.
Sure. So in the early days, how did you get the word out about Pandora to attract listeners?
Well, people told each other about it. You know, we've barely marketed Pandora. We've had virtually no marketing budget from the beginning, and our marketing strategy was to fuel evangelism. So one thing we've done from the get-go, and we do this in Australia and New Zealand, is we engage with people who use Pandora as much as we can. You know, we answer every single email with a personal reply. We do town halls for Pandora listeners throughout the year. We've done hundreds of them. I just recently got back from doing them in Auckland and Melbourne and Sydney. There almost over 500 people showed up to the one in Sydney just to kind of connect with people individually. And we found that obviously the product kind of speaks for itself. People use it, get excited about it, and want to tell folks. But then we throw gas on that by really engaging with those folks. And that's kind of been this, you know, that's been it. We've done some search engine marketing. And then more recently, we've had this great luxury of being, you know, an important partner for car companies, consumer electronics companies, mobile services, mobile devices. And so we're included in these marketing campaigns where we get kind of in-kind free advertising as part of these big campaigns. And I think that's fueled growth as well.
So what role do you see mobile and I guess specifically iPhones having played in the growth of Pandora?
What's the ball game? I mean, we were, until 2007, we were virtually exclusively on the desktop, and we had the great good fortune of getting early access to the iPhone, the App Store platform before it came out, so we were there the day it launched, and we added 40,000 people the day we launched on the App Store, and that number just kept going up. And the iPhone drove not only this massive acceleration in growth, but it also is what triggered this migration to all these devices, because as soon as someone had these mobile phones, they could go plug them into everything. So, for example, car dashboards. And when that began happening, the car companies were hearing it from their own consumers. They then turned around and said, well, let's embed this on our dashboards. And the same thing happened for connected TVs and Blu-ray players, connected stereos, Sonos, the likes of all those sort of audio products. They heard about people docking iPhones and streaming them through these machines. So we now have over 1,000 devices that stream Pandora, and it all traces back to the smartphone.
Sure. So in terms of monetizing Pandora, how is that working out for you? Obviously, you sort of have a freemium model at the moment where some users can use it for free and they listen to ads, but people can pay and get rid of the ads. How's that mix working out?
Yeah, so we're not a traditional freemium business in that we are creating a funnel of free users and trying to shove them into being paying customers. We fundamentally believe this is primarily an ad-supported product, and that's where we live and die, by building a great ad-supported business, and we want to make that a great service. We want to give the option for people, if they don't want to have ads, to pay, but we don't view that as kind of the end game. And so in the advertising world, it's going gangbusters. We had a 2-year kind of really rapid growth on the desktop, and then we took a few steps back when all of a sudden, in less than 2 years, we went from 0 mobile to 70% mobile listening. That was a huge shock, and we had to reinvent our whole ad platform to accommodate this tiny little device. But that has picked up, and it's growing really quickly. And in the meantime, we've developed all these competencies around, how to build products, how to integrate them with the service and traffic and report, and now bringing targeting. So we've got a lot of weapons in our arsenal now.
And obviously, off the back of seeing this, a number of the other music streaming services are trying to get into this creation of your own radio stations, such as Spotify and iHeartRadio and iTunes Radio. How do you see them? Do you see them as competition, or you think that Pandora is so far advanced in this they're not going to be able to really compete in the same way?
Well, anybody that's delivering radio, including AM/FM, we view as competition, absolutely. So far, we have not seen a service come along that's impacted our growth in any significant way. iTunes Radio, when it first came out, there was sort of a momentary slowdown for us, but we picked right back up. So far, this service has been really resilient, and I think it's because personalized radio is fantastically hard to do, and it's been our sole focus for over a decade. And so you see businesses come along, and there have been many that try to recreate it, mostly by just using collaborative filtering, sort of data mining, and that's just not enough to create a great listening experience. And people are not very forgiving of radio. If you play a song someone doesn't like, or a few in a row, they're done. So the bar is high, and it takes a lot to create a robust system.
With all of these different services we're seeing here in Australia, they're sort of building at the moment, and a number of them are refusing to give out statistics around their users. What are your thoughts on disclosing audience metrics?
Well, it's obviously critical if you're serious about advertising business. You need to be transparent with that, and we release them sort of periodically. The last number we put out in March was 1.5 million people down there. That's growing 100,000 a month. I mean, it's growing like a weed. It's actually growing faster there than it did in the U.S. as a percent of population. And so, we have sort of a drumbeat of releasing that information so that the team can obviously effectively present it to advertisers. But if you really want to build an ad-supported business, you can't keep your numbers to yourself. You have to open your kimono. Otherwise, you can't really function. So we're big fans of transparency.
The other thing that's sort of been making headlines lately around Pandora is the music licensing issue. So obviously here in Australia, you pay royalties to APRA and AMCOS. What's the situation with licensing? How is that causing challenges for you?
Yeah, so it's been kind of an unpleasant couple of years on that topic, largely because I think this isn't a well understood issue, and it's got a lot of emotion attached to it. You know, internet radio, one of the, I think, the most positive turns the music industry has had, and there haven't been very many in the last decade, is the migration from AM/FM to the web, because internet radio pays royalties to performing artists, which AM/FM doesn't. It does in Australia and New Zealand, but a fraction of the rate that is paid by internet radio. So it's actually a really positive move. There's a really emotional debate around how much that should be, and I think what's going to happen over time is it'll rationalize. You know, it'll be the number that is fair and equitable and allows artists to participate in the business that they're obviously key to growing. But it'll also be at a rate that will allow these services to flourish, because I think the value of internet radio is twofold. It's part of it, of course, is generating revenue, direct revenue in terms of royalties. But I think more importantly, it's a foundation for building audiences and allowing artists to connect to their fans. And we're actually in the early part of what will become a whole set of features on Pandora, whose only goal is to allow artists to harvest their audiences on the service. So literally, if you're an artist, you can log in, claim your identity, and essentially interact with your fans. So you can look at a map of all the thumbs up and see it plotted, and see where to drive your tour van, and give people geographically targeted alerts in the form of audio bumpers to let you know you're coming. Send special messages. Drive commerce. There's never ever been a platform like ours that combines the scale we have with that kind of communication and targeting. Never before. It's unprecedented, and we're about to make that available to musicians. And I think when that happens, the arguments over royalties will seem trite.
Fair enough. That makes sense. So, can you share with us what's next for Pandora? What are your plans moving forward?
Conquering Australia and New Zealand is priority number one for Team Huxley. So I guess, in some ways it's kind of more of the same. I mean, we're trying to build, to obviously grow to be billions of listeners, to be completely global. So we're just in 3 countries right now, 3 great countries, but there are a lot more to go. And we have ambitions to be everywhere. And that involves licensing discussions. It involves, an enormous distribution infrastructure. So a bunch of things to sort of block and tackling to do there. And then on the flip side of that is, create kind of a middle class of musicians, like build this platform and make it available, and literally fundamentally change what it means to be a working musician. And one of the things that's really exciting about launching in Australia and New Zealand is that, we're furiously analyzing local music in both countries. And if you're, a local artist in Adelaide, when you get added to Pandora, you're not just getting spun for people in Adelaide, you're immediately getting spun for 250 million registered listeners between all 3 countries. So it's like this nuclear reaction when your music gets added, and that's only going to grow. And I hope, and I think someday it will come to pass that the day your song gets added to Pandora, that's it. Quit your job, get the band together, and go, because it's going to be like add water and stir.
So it's no longer getting the big recording contract. You've just got to get your song on Pandora, and then you're set.
Well, I think there will still be those, but Pandora is going to be an engine like there's never been before for musicians.
And you were saying in terms of classifying music coming in from Australia, do you find the characteristics of those songs are different from characteristics from, say, the United States? Are there trends that you see?
We all come from the same roots, I mean, you can trace music together, so it's not foreign to us, the music, at all. And that's one of the great pleasures of this, is connecting this music across the world. And it's a common language that we all speak, and it's a common music theoretic structure that we all know. You know, there's obviously indigenous Australian music that is distinct, that requires local knowledge that we're bringing, but still it's all overlaps this big kind of, you know, big melting pot of stuff. You know, there's an artist, Claude Hay, who plays, you know, almost 300 times a month across Pandora. He's been a local artist in Sydney for a long time. Those kind of artists are going to explode eventually on Pandora.
And what about for you personally, when you're listening to Pandora, what's your favorite station? Do you have a particular song that you like to seed, or is there a genre or an artist that you like?
Well, I'm a piano player, so I'm partial to pianists. My kind of go-to radio stations is Ben Folds right now. He's a singer-songwriter, piano player, and I discover a lot of bands on those stations. But you know, you could find me one day listening to Bach, and then a day listening to some, you know, Taylor Swift, and then listening to, you know, Midnight Oil. So it's a huge range. I like it all.
I know that when I was at the ADMA Data Day and Jane was speaking, she was saying that her hot tip was that if you're looking to get on Pandora, you're better off to seed a song than an actual artist or a genre. Can you tell me a bit about why that is?
Well, a song is a more specific starting point. It's more precise information for Pandora. If you type in an artist, we assume you like everything that artist has ever done, and I think oftentimes when people think of an artist, they're actually thinking of a song or two of that artist they really like, but they may not like that artist's entire repertoire. You know, they might have done an acoustic album or a blues album, or had taken some detour into free jazz one year, and that all we assume that you want to include that. So you've got to use the thumbs and pretty actively prune the station so it'll work for you. A song is a much more kind of, you know, direct bead on what you want. We can get accurate much more quickly.
Well, I think that's about all we have time for. Thank you so much for talking to us today, Tim.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
We'll leave it there. Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.